Welcome, everyone, into the Locked On Syracuse podcast. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on this episode, we're joined by SiriusXM Mad Dog Sports radio host Damon Amendolara. He is also a Syracuse alum. We're going to go over his time during and after Syracuse, his thoughts on the Fran Brown and Adrian Autry tenures so far at Syracuse, and his thoughts on the new NIL and transfer portal landscape that we are all living in. But before that, first, a quick message from Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, everyone, let's get right into the conversation.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're joined here by Damon Amendolara. He is the host of the DA Show on SiriusXM, Mad Dog Sports Radio, weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern. And Damon, I just want to start off by saying thank you for joining us. This is hopefully the start of a brand new series where I'll be bringing on broadcasters from the industry. Some of them will be Syracuse alum like yourself. Some of them will just be names around the industry that we have all heard of. I want to start off, though, with you, with your time at Syracuse. What was your goal when you were there?
Well, it was obviously to get a position, create a career in sports media. But to be honest, I didn't know where in sports media that was going to be. I didn't know whether that was going to be play-by-play. I didn't know whether that was going to be perhaps on television doing highlights for local anchoring or sports center type anchor. I didn't know whether that might be in sports radio as update anchor or as play-by-play. And I certainly didn't think it was going to be in sports talk because I never really envisioned myself as a sports talk host. But as things kind of evolved, I tried to do a little bit of everything when I was at SU. And when I got out of college, my first job was in Fort Myers, Florida. And there I kind of was a jack of all trades. It was do a little bit of fill-in hosting, be a board op, be a producer, do some updates. And as I got to host, I realized, wow, this is really where my heart is. This truly felt like what I was supposed to do. And so from there, I focused on that to be the central point of my career. But at SU, I really didn't know what part of sports media I was going to be in. I just kind of knew I needed a microphone. I didn't know how that was going to play out, though.
I feel like that's a lot with the case with most people that come to Syracuse. You just want to get into the business and then you see what happens there. What was it like covering Syracuse back then? You were the class of Syracuse 2001. Obviously, the teams were pretty good then. So what was it like for you then?
Well, football specifically was really exciting. I mean, my sophomore year, Syracuse still had Donovan McNabb as the quarterback. That was his last year. And they had come off of a Fiesta Bowl appearance. They would end up in the Orange Bowl. They won the Big East multiple years, and they had NFL talent all across the roster. And games against Virginia Tech or games against Miami felt like massive, massive events. And so it's hard to imagine today, but imagine Syracuse being regularly ranked, competing for a conference championship, and having the number 2 pick in the NFL draft under center. It's a totally different world. So football was massive, absolutely massive. And they played at Michigan. They played Tennessee at the Carrier Dome. I mean, imagine a program that just had Peyton Manning under center coming to the Carrier Dome for a Saturday in Central New York. It's kind of hard to even put into words that type of excitement. Basketball was good. They weren't quite as good as they were in the 80s when I was there. Yep. They were a few years after the national championship team that had lost in 96 in the Final Four in the title game to Kentucky, but they were still perennially a tournament team. I mean, they would always win 20 games, and they would always be one of the top seeds of the Big East tournament, and they would always be in the tournament. So it was certainly a great time. But then you also had lacrosse that almost every year you were guaranteed to be in the Final Four. So all three programs were humming pretty good when we were there, and that made all of those games that we covered feel like truly massive events.
Awesome. And so now talking about the teams nowadays, they're obviously in a little bit of a rebuilding state. The lacrosse team is doing well right now. Let's start off with football, though, because you had a very interesting take that I read about with the Fran Brown hire, which is getting back to that second tier of teams. What do you think that Syracuse has to do to become that second tier once again?
Yeah, I write for a site that I actually own a site and run a site called the Orange Fizz. And there, we kind of document on a daily basis the comings and goings, the ups and downs of Syracuse football amongst basketball and other things around campus, specifically sports. But from a football standpoint, I don't think it's realistic to imagine Fran Brown recreating Georgia magic at Syracuse. There's just not enough talent in the Northeast to build that. There's not enough resources at Syracuse or in the ACC to build that. But can you be that second tier program where you win 8, 9, or 10 games a year, and on a really good year, you compete for an ACC championship? On a really down year, you're going 7-5 or 8-4. But that's kind of where the barometer should be, I think, for a program such as Syracuse, because we've seen it in the past. Now, that was a different time, no doubt. It was a different coaching staff. And today, there's far more teams that are competing for the same dollars and athletes than maybe there was back then. So it's a slow build and it's a more competitive space. At the same time, Syracuse, if they hit the right hires and they recruit the right kids out of a transfer portal, which now you don't have to go into high schools and get 4-star kids. Now you get a Kyle McCord in a transfer portal. You should, to me, be able to elevate yourself to a 7, 8, or maybe 9-win program if you do it right. Now, there's no guarantee you do it right. But I think that's where you're always looking to be if you're Syracuse. That keeps the goals realistic but aspirational. And I think if the Syracuse faithful saw a football program that every year they didn't have to worry about being 3-9 and instead knew that bottom is going to be 6-6, top is going to be 9-3 or 9-4, that to me is where you start turning the corner into momentum. Fans start showing up regularly. Spring games are important. Players start wanting to play there, and coaches want to aspire to be there. And I said this in my piece. If Fran Brown has 3 great years and leaves to go become a coach at a top tier Big Ten school or a top tier team of the SEC, that's a good thing. And
Yeah.
Syracuse should not fear that. I think there's always this fear that, oh, now we got to find the next guy. You can be Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is a really good place to be because Cincinnati has employed Brian Kelly and, go down the list of coaches that went on to a bigger job after that. If you're Cincinnati and you're churning out 8 and 9 win seasons and coaches that go to the next level, so be it. That's fine. That means you're doing something right.
When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn is a tool that I use all the time to find the latest job opportunities. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And one thing that I've always said with Syracuse football is I kind of agree with you. Like, you're never going to be a Georgia caliber team, but especially with the playoff now expanding to 12 teams and eventually 14 teams, I think it is a realistic goal that in the next 10 years, they make one playoff. Like, I legitimately think they could make it. I now want to talk a little bit about basketball and Adrian Autry. How do you think he fared in his first season with Syracuse?
Well, I know that they didn't make the tournament and they declined, obviously, an NIT bid, but I think it was a huge victory. You know, you take 45 years of the way something was done and you try to change it, rarely is it going to be better or smooth. And the fact is, Adrian Autry actually had a better season than most of Jim Boeheim's years in the last decade of his career. Things had stagnated under Jim. I think Jim had become the type of guy that kind of set it and forget it. This is the way that it's always been done. I kind of like swim in and swim out when I need to. The frustration with the media clearly had reached a boil. I think frustration maybe with the way that college basketball had gone was pretty obviously wearing on him. And I think you needed somebody that felt like they wanted to be there. And this is a weird thing to say about a guy that was there for 45 years and will always be synonymous with Syracuse basketball. But I always felt like the sneer and the cynicism and the gotcha stuff that he would do at the podium with the media made it feel like he had lost the joy in the job. And when you root for a team, what you are looking for is joy as a fan. And what you don't want to hear from the people that are playing or coaching is that it's a slog or a chore for them. You want to believe, man, if I had a chance to coach Syracuse basketball or play Syracuse basketball, that would be a true, gift. Now, the people doing it look like they don't want to be there. And I felt like Boeheim gave off that vibe so often. Autry comes in and it feels like he's juiced up. He's re-energized. He's focused. It feels like the program has somebody who has life in them and wants to do it and wants the challenge and doesn't fear the press conferences or isn't angry at the media or isn't angry at the naysayers. And I think that was a very healthy transition that Syracuse basketball needed. The wins were better. The conference record was better. They didn't get that tournament bid, but that's not how I would grade out Autry's first year. I thought overall, high passing grades for Autry.
To your point, with the wins in the last 10 years, Syracuse hadn't won 20 games since their first year in the ACC, which is in 2014. So, yeah, they didn't get that tournament bid, but I think getting that NIT bid, which they declined, was a step in the right direction. But there is one reason for concern when it comes to progress, and that is the new NIL and transfer portal, and it's the wild, wild west out there. Every year is different. I want to know what your thoughts on that, and also something about Boeheim here that you mentioned. How do you think NIL and transfer portal impact maybe Boeheim's desire to keep coaching?
I think it wore on him. I think it wears on a lot of the old coaches, and I could understand why. I think that if you are Tom Izzo or Jim Boeheim, Coach K, Roy Williams, Jay Wright, you've only known a lifetime of going to high schools, going to peach jams, going to AAU circuits, and making some type of relationships with the player, with the family, with the high school coaches. And you are used to investing your energy there when they're sophomores and juniors in high school, maybe even earlier, developing some type of trust, getting them on campus, and then when they're on campus, doing what you believe is best for the team and maybe also best for them as a basketball player to help out the program. And today, you don't have to do a lick of work in high school. You're really about when these guys get to college campuses, when they hit the transfer portal, that's when you start piecing together a free agent team. And once you do that and they're on campus, if you don't play them the way that they want, if you don't give them the minutes that they want, if you're too hard on them, too critical of them, what have you, or if they just don't like it for whatever reason, they don't have to listen to your advice. They just go, I'll find a coach that wants to do it my way. I'll find a coach that tells me the things that I want to do. There's 300 and some odd coaches out there in Division One. I'll just find the program that tells me what I want to hear. And so all of these old school guys feel as though what has been lost, and Nick Saban talked about this, what has been lost is the communal idea that when you get to campus, I'm going to put you in places that helps out everybody. And by helping out everybody, it will help out you. It will help out you get drafted or get to the next level. And what these players are doing, they're dismantling that concept. That leverage doesn't work anymore because if a coach says it's best for you to learn to watch for the first year, or it's best for you to play off ball, or it's best for you to only play 13 minutes a game, even if the grander vision is, and that helps us win more games, that helps you in your junior year and senior year, the player goes, well, I don't want that, and so I will find somewhere else. And so it is, I'm sure, very disheartening for coaches because in their mind, they're trying to do what's best for everybody, but there's small battles they have to win along the way. And players are going, I don't want to lose any battles. I only want to win in my vision. And so they're at constant odds. It doesn't mean it can't be done because, look, Danny Hurley just crushed it doing it the way that he did it at UConn 2 straight years. It can be done. I'm just saying the coaches that have done it a certain way for a long time, I'm sure, feel at a loss of how to do it a new way.
So what are your thoughts on it in general? I mean, you kind of gave it the perspective of the coaches, but what are your thoughts on the transfer portal and NIL in general?
Well, I think what happened was the college sports scene had tilted so far in one direction that it had to start swinging back. And we're in this market correction. When tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars are being allocated by television networks and media rights deals for conferences. And there's that much money for coaches and administrators. You can no longer tell players you don't get any of the money because all of the administrators are doing all of the decisions for that cash. Kirby Smart is going to make $13 million a year. $13 million a year. And you're supposed to tell a kid that he plays for, but you get no money. The general manager, I should say, the president or the chancellor of a school like Syracuse says, well, we're going to go to the ACC. Or West Virginia says, we're going to go to the Big 12. Or Colorado, we're going back to the Big 12. Whatever that movement is. At Oklahoma and Texas, we're going to go to the SEC. All of them are destroying decades, a century of regional rivalries and schools that they're akin to for money. There is no other reason besides the bottom dollar, the last cent on that check is why we do this. And then you're going to convince the players that, but they shouldn't care about themselves. They should have a larger view of everything, and they don't get any of the money. That just simply cannot jive anymore. So because it swung so far one way, it had to come back the other way. But the liberties and the freedoms that players deserve have gone so far that it's skewed, I think, too far the other way, where players, I don't think athletes should have unlimited transfers or almost unlimited eligibility, nor do I think that the eligibility windows or the transfer windows should be as wide or as frequent as they are. So the whole thing's been disrupted. It needed to change, but we're in this strange middle ground, which I would imagine is going to be about 5 to 7 years, where nobody has rules, nobody has control over it, and nobody knows what it's necessarily going to look like. I would imagine you and I will have a conversation 10 years from now, and we will say things have stabilized. Now there's structure. Now there's an understanding of how things work. But remember when we did that interview back in 2024 and how crazy everything was? I think we're living through that.
All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing PCs to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or a robot Panico machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So, Damon, it's funny you mentioned that with the restrictions and everything, because if anything, they're actually getting looser. I believe recently the NCAA waived that you had to apply for a second transfer. It used to be, it was kind of fugazi anyway, but a player, if they wanted to transfer twice, still had to apply. Now they don't. They can just enter the portal basically whenever they want. And you mentioned something interesting about money. And so I actually watched your video about Peacock and the Dolphins Chiefs, and it was hilarious the way you broke it down. And, you know, every team gets a CJ Ham. How do you feel about streaming in sports in general?
Well, I understand that media changes every single day. I mean, the media landscape that I graduated into in 2001 is incredibly different than it is today. And I have to be able to adjust to that. And you saw that video on YouTube, and I've invested resources into doing videos and building out a channel and a live show on YouTube because I realize there's momentum towards streaming services, free platforms, things like YouTube, etc. So just putting games on streaming services is not something I'm against. That ploy to me was a cheap one by the NFL because it was done as a favor basically to a streaming service to help out their subscriptions, their audience. The NFL will tell you, well, we do this because we're following where the audience is going. But that's not true. The NFL's audience is wherever it puts on games. Not one single person said, I'm not going to watch Chiefs and Dolphins in the playoffs because it's not on streaming. Nobody ever said, I'm going to miss an NFL playoff game because it's not on the platform that I want on my device. Everybody goes to TV for their football. I didn't like that at all because it was a cheap ploy for not a ton of money to make a lot of people upset, to manipulate them into signing up for a subscription to help out Peacock. So I hated that. But ultimately, I understand that games are going to be on Amazon and games are going to be on Peacock. And, you know, one day I might work on Amazon or Peacock or ESPN Plus or any one of a number of digital streaming devices. I just think that leagues need to be, specifically the NFL, who holds all of the cards, needs to be more understanding of the audience. And I think that oftentimes the NFL is so greedy because they are so powerful that they manipulate the audience to be where they need it to be so that they can make more money instead of really being where the audience is. Was there ever a reason to have Sunday morning games streamed on Twitter? Was there a reason to have games streamed on Yahoo on a Sunday morning? Is there reasons to have Thursday on Amazon? Are there reasons to have one playoff game on Peacock? All of these were always money grabs by the NFL instead of, quote, following an audience. If the MLS goes, we get a bigger audience by being on Apple TV. You know what? I could understand that. They're still growing their audience and finding new ways to connect. The NFL doesn't need one game, Chiefs, Dolphins in the playoffs to somehow build a better audience.
I completely agree with you on that. And also, NHL games are sometimes only on ESPN Plus, which drives me bananas. I hate that. I refuse, and I might one day work for ESPN, but I just refuse to get ESPN Plus because I'm not going to do it. I love the NHL, but I'm not going to do it. I do want to ask you briefly about your life after Syracuse. You've obviously moved around a lot. What was the toughest part about all the moves?
I always viewed moving around the country as an adventure, it was a privilege to be able to be paid to do what I really wanted to do. So whoever was willing to give me a microphone and a salary, I was happy to do. I think the biggest challenge was starting to build an audience from day one at multiple stops. My first job was in Fort Myers, Florida. I didn't have any brand, any audience, nobody, no notoriety. So that was an easy one. I didn't have much experience and I went to Kansas City. And from there, I started to build a bit of a brand and a reputation and an audience. When I left Kansas City to move to Miami, I had gone from nighttime host to morning time, morning drive host in Kansas City. And then it was like, poof, all that goes away because there's nobody in Overland Park, Kansas that wants to hear your Miami Dolphins take. So I then moved to Miami and you start from ground zero. Then I left Miami to go to Boston. And again, I was starting right from Jump Street. And then when I left Boston, I went to the national side and CBS Sports Radio. And since I went to the national side of things, that audience can transfer easily because the topics that I was talking about as an overnight host in 2013 are probably mostly the same topics I'm talking about that many years later as a morning host on SiriusXM. the NBA playoffs, a game like Sixers and Knicks, what Deion Sanders might do, what the NFL draft looked like. Those are topics that are interchangeable. But when you go from an audience that really loves your show and you feel really a bonded a connection to now you got to leave them and leave that, start all over again. That was a tough one for multiple stops in my career.
Got it. And recently you did make a transition from CBS Sports Radio to SiriusXM. How has that been for you?
Well, it's been awesome. SiriusXM is a pretty special sports. It's a special company in general, but it's a really special sports um, institution because you'll never work anywhere else where basically you have rights to everything. I mean, I'm on mornings on SiriusXM, and you can listen to every game of the NFL season with your home broadcaster on SiriusXM. You sign up to listen to me, and you can get Mitch Holthus in Kansas City if you're a Chiefs fan. You can get every game for the New York Giants and Bob Papa. You can get every game if you're a Bears fan and listen to Jeff Joniak, et cetera. And that's a really powerful thing. And then, I'm talking about Caitlin Clark in the morning, and I say, and listen tonight to SiriusXM channel, what have you, because the women's Final Four is on, and this is going to be, Caitlin Clark versus UConn. I mean, that's a powerful thing. So there is such an amazing volume of assets that we can have on. And by virtue of that, a lot of guests come on that work within the company. Our rights, we can use all these highlights and have insight and have analysts and all of that. So that's a really special thing and quite a powerful thing to have behind you. So it's been pretty amazing.
Awesome. And I know you do a lot of meet and greets. Why is that?
Well, I've always found that to be successful in a sports talk realm, the audience really has to believe you as an authentic person, that what you are, who you are, what you say is truly what you believe, and who you are. It's a very intimate relationship. They feel like they're with you. They're friends with you. They spend hours with you every week. They spend in their day, usually a very specific moment of their day with you. It might be in the car on the way to work, in the car on the way home from work, at the office at lunch, or in a podcast form when they're running or something like that. So I always felt actually meeting people that were listening was really powerful. It was powerful for me because I got to see the audience at the other side of the microphone. Who are the people listening to me and how are they digesting this? And it's quite an honor also to have people that care so much about what you say. But then the flip side is I'd like people to see me for who I am. And that is, let's have a beer, let's go to a game, let's watch this, let's joke about this, let's have a good time together, because I've always felt like sports is a rare unifying force in a divided country, in a divided world. And the great unifier is meeting somebody in person. I mean, when you meet somebody in person, just even if it's for 30 seconds, there's a different connection there that if you see somebody over Twitter, on TV, listen over the radio, or over Zoom. It's a really intimate connection. So I love meeting people for that reason.
Yeah, and also when regarding sports, I mean, this is a Locked On Syracuse podcast. We're going to talk Syracuse sports. Sometimes we'll go a little bit national as well, but we don't talk about the hard-hitting news issues out there. We're not talking politics or anything like that. So this is a community where everyone can go to, and we can all just share our love and passion for sports. Damon, before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, since you guys are locked on Syracuse, and we have a lot of Syracuse fans that are watching and listening to you, Jackson, I just wanted to remind everybody that Orange Fizz is the site that I run and write, and we have an incredible staff of people that are on site covering every game, doing podcasts, post-game reactions on Twitter. So if you go to theorangefizz.com and just kind of check in, you'll see some awesome coverage, or follow us on Twitter/X @OrangeFizz, and you'll get all the links to all of our stuff. But right now we're really booming. The excitement around Fran Brown is legit. It's real. Our numbers, our traffic has never been higher. So I'm very excited about this summer, about this fall, about going into football season, and hopefully your viewers, your listeners can check us out at the Fizz.
Awesome. Yeah, I will certainly leave a link in the description below to orangefizz.com. Damon, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on the podcast.
My pleasure, Jackson. Anytime, buddy. Thanks so much.